My name is Laurel Thorne, and I'm 31 years old. My life felt as if it had been put on permanent mute, not because I was naturally reserved, but because years of experience had taught me that the only way to avoid being accused of making a big deal out of nothing was to smooth off my edges and lower my voice. Yet, on the night of my 31st birthday, I personally shattered the shell of silence that had enveloped me for half my life. The incident took place at my parents' old home in Westland, a house covered in ivy that always seemed to radiate a warm, cozy aura in photographs. But only those who stepped inside truly understood. The air was thick with an unyielding stiffness and emotional distance, and every breath felt carefully restrained, almost fraught with tension. The dinner party began in a way that was almost too perfect to be real. Soft yellow light spilled across the vintage wooden dining table, and the laughter of friends mingled with the sweet aroma of cream as it wafted through the room. Right in the center of the table sat a rich, dark brown chocolate mousse cake, exactly the flavor I'd loved since childhood, the very kind my mom used to go out of her way to buy from the Sweetheart Bakery in Ellsbury every single time it was my birthday. For a few minutes there, I almost began to believe that this warmth was real, until the front door swung open, and the sound of stiletto heels tapping against the wooden floor grew louder and closer, like an icy chisel shattering the serenity before my eyes in an instant. She was late again, a habit ingrained in her very bones, as if every occasion should make way for her grand entrance. My sister, Vespera Thorne, walked in without saying a word, her gaze sweeping over the crowd without ever meeting mine, not even glancing at the feast laid out on the table. Instead, she zeroed in immediately on the chocolate mousse cake. "How old are you now? Still indulging in this sickeningly sweet junk?" Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried a chilling coldness that was far more painful than outright mockery, like an ice pick gently scraping along your bones. I clenched my hands beneath the table, digging my nails into my palms, forcing myself to muster a polite smile. "Vespera, today is my birthday." She took 2 steps forward, and a flicker of familiar defiance flashed in her eyes, a look I'd known all my life. As soon as it appeared, I knew my peace would be utterly shattered. Before I could even rise from my chair, she'd already reached out with both hands, snatched the cake's base in one swift motion, and spun around, hurling the entire cake with all her might into the kitchen trash bin in the corner. There was a muffled thud. Chocolate mousse smacked against the plastic lining at the bottom of the bin, wet, soft crumbs mixed with cream splattering everywhere, sliding down the white garbage bag and leaving a brownish streak across the floor. The laughter in the room came to an abrupt halt. Everyone froze in place, the air seeming to solidify into ice. All that could be heard was the faint sound of someone gasping sharply for breath. I stood rooted to the spot, neither moving nor, as I usually would, silently enduring it all. Instead, I stared straight at Vespera, each word deliberate and sharp. "Get out." A cruel smile slowly spread across Vespera's face, like that of someone who just won a battle they'd been certain of from the start, carrying with it the arrogance and disdain of a victor. She turned and walked toward the door, never looking back, leaving behind only a rich, yet sickeningly sweet scent of cream that filled the room, and an eerie silence, one so profound it seemed ready to swallow you whole. It wasn't a fleeting pause. Rather, it was a malevolent stillness, lurking in wait, poised to drag you deeper into despair. Before I continue, could you please leave your city and time in the comments? Let's see just how far this story can travel tonight. That night, long-buried memories were suddenly unlocked. What truly pierced my heart wasn't the cake or the deathly silence. It was the lifelong favoritism my parents showed toward one sibling over the other. The old mansion in Westland remained unchanged, yet in an instant, I found myself once again the little girl who'd always come up short in their eyes. Vespera Thorne would forever be the sun shining brightly in her parents' palms, while I was merely her shadow, so faint that even the split vision of my parents couldn't quite reach me. As a child, my mom would always sit in front of the mirror, carefully braiding Vespera's hair with delicate fingertips, so gentle, as if handling a rare treasure. All the while, she'd keep praising her. "My little angel, you're absolutely exquisite." I'd sit quietly nearby, silently tying my shoelaces. Every now and then, she'd turn to me and say only one thing. "Lyriel, take a page from your sister's book. Stop being so unremarkable all the time." That remark felt like a curse. Combined with my parents' constant favoritism toward Vespera, it gradually wore away every bit of my individuality. I took on all the household chores, maintained top grades, and never once dared to speak back. But none of that ever measured up in my parents' eyes, not even close to Vespera's single little whimper or coquettish gesture. That day, Vespera spun around and accidentally broke Mom's favorite crystal vase. Just as I reached for the broom to start cleaning up, Mom snapped at me sharply. "Lyriel, why are you always so clumsy?" I froze right where I stood. But when Vespera pretended to look genuinely remorseful, Dad actually walked over and gently stroked her head, saying, "It's okay. Let's just get a new one. Don't scare my precious daughter." In that moment, I finally understood. The truth about our family could be ignored, but my parents' favoritism was never absent. My dad was busy with work year after year, leaving all household matters entirely up to my mom. Yet Mom's scales always tilted toward Vespera. I could only find a sense of belonging at school. The certificates I won with painstaking effort, I'd carefully bring home, but Mom wouldn't even glance at them. She'd just keep fussing over Vespera, helping her try on a new dress. What's the point of good grades when looks are so much more important? Look how beautifully your sister is dressed. Dad sat quietly by, nodding in agreement, as if my efforts were utterly worthless. Gradually, I stopped trying to please my parents and began hiding my achievements instead. After I went off to college, I thought distance might soften their bias. But in the end, that hope turned out to be nothing but a luxury I couldn't afford. Every week during our phone calls, Mom would start by asking about Vespera. When Vespera headed north to the Institute of Arts and Crafts to study makeup design, my parents threw a grand farewell party, complete with balloons and a professional photographer. When I received the scholarship for the specialty of ancient book restoration, all they said was a casual, "That's nice," not even offering a single meal to celebrate. That perfunctory attitude hurt me more than any outright scolding ever could. 6 months later, when Vespera dropped out of school, her parents didn't utter a single word of reproach. Instead, they comforted her. "It's okay. Take your time finding your path. We'll support you." They even continued sending her monthly living expenses on time. Years later, when I offered to cover my dad's hospital bills, my mom quickly stopped me. "Don't do that. Vespera would feel bad. She just can't afford to help out." Even my filial piety had to give way to her inability to handle things herself. As we grew older, my parents' favoritism became increasingly polite. Vespera's mistakes were misunderstandings, while my boundaries were labeled as coldness. At family dinners, Vespera always stole the spotlight, enthusiastically talking about her career as a beauty blogger, with my parents listening with smiles in their eyes. All I had to do was quietly agree, and if I dared to voice even the slightest disagreement, I'd be accused of being immature and disrupting family harmony. Silence doesn't bring peace. It merely helps my parents cover up their favoritism and my own deep sense of injustice. Every time I return home, the mantelpiece always holds Vespera's ungraduated college admission photo, its frame spotless and polished to perfection. Their pride. And so I became invisible in my own family. I comforted myself by telling myself that fairness had never existed in our home, yet deep down I knew. My parents had never truly seen me. Their love, from beginning to end, was always tainted with bias. Even after spending 30 years trying to please them, I still couldn't earn a single ounce of genuine affection from them. The moment Vespera threw away the cake, it finally dawned on me. This wasn't about the dessert at all. It was the long overdue eruption of decades of accumulated parental favoritism. She could hurt others recklessly, yet always be indulged, while I was forever expected to bear it silently. My silence was taken for granted as forgiveness, and her mistakes were glossed over by my parents. That cake didn't just carry chocolate. It carried all the silence and bitterness I'd swallowed over 30 years, trapped in my parents' biased love. "You're overreacting. What's the big deal? It was just a cake." Her brazen insolence burned deeper than any anger could. I edited a few replies, then deleted them again. Saying more would only make things worse, so I tossed my phone aside and went back to cleaning. Not long after, Mom called, her voice deliberately soft. "I've talked to your sister. She's really upset. Don't let this escalate. It's just not worth it." I clenched my phone tighter. "She threw away my birthday cake." There was a brief pause on the other end, followed by a sigh. "Family quarrels are inevitable. Just let it go." That one little phrase, "let it go," has always been Mom's way of telling me to pretend nothing happened. I mumbled something about being busy and hung up. An hour later, Dad called, his tone casual and nonchalant. "I heard there was some trouble last night. Vespera was just trying to get attention. Don't take it too seriously." My throat tightened, but I replied calmly, "I got it." After hanging up, I saved the video to a private folder on my computer. Kyle leaned over and asked, "You're keeping it?" I nodded. "Maybe it'll come in handy someday." He didn't ask any further, just nodded, his eyes hinting at a premonition of the storm that was about to break. That day dragged on unusually slowly. I kept tidying up after the party, anything to keep my hands busy. The winter sky over Westland was pale and icy, its light utterly devoid of warmth. The silence was heavy with oppression. Every time my phone vibrated, my heart would leap, a tiny fear that Vespera might be tampering with the story. I hadn't replied to a single message, had turned down Kyle's offer of a drive, and sat alone scrolling through photos from the party. The smiles before the collapse were especially jarring. I zoomed in on Vespera's face, her brow already furrowed, her expression distant and aloof. Maybe she'd planned all along to ruin it all. By evening, my inbox was flooded with messages from relatives. "What's going on? Your mom said there's been a misunderstanding." "Vespera's really upset." I was astonished at how quickly her version of events had spread. I didn't respond. I watched the video again, and all that was left in my heart was clarity. Not about the cake, but about the evidence. Proof that I wasn't imagining being looked down upon. Proof that the woman everyone adored was secretly so cruel behind closed doors. I closed my laptop, and for the first time, I didn't feel like making excuses or trying to smooth things over. I just let the silence spread. I'd been hoping this would blow over like it always did, but deep down, I knew this time was different. The storm hadn't passed. It was only gathering strength. Early the next morning, I was jolted awake by the vibration of my phone. 50 missed calls and a strange video stared back at me. I'd assumed it was either work or a friend checking in, but when I opened it, I saw Vespera's post. "Some people just can't help revealing their true nature at family gatherings," accompanied by a crying emoji and a heart. It had already racked up hundreds of likes and shares. In the comments section, strangers who didn't know the full story started blasting me with accusations of cold-heartedness and callousness, and anger surged through me in an instant. As I scrolled further down, my stomach felt like it was churning violently. She actually edited a 15-second video, keeping only the sound of me saying, "Get out," and completely cutting out the part where I threw the cake. She portrayed me as an irritable, ungrateful older sister, deliberately framing me in this way. The cold-heartedness of this deliberate frame-up made my fingertips tremble with rage, and my heart was pounding like a drum. Kyle stumbled in, still half asleep, and after watching the video, he whispered softly, "She actually posted it online." I nodded, my voice tight. "It's already gone viral." I turned on my computer, and sure enough, the post had spread across the entire internet. People were recording their screens and reposting it, tagging it with the caption, "Don't cherish your family." The unwarranted accusations from strangers felt like needles piercing my skin. Messages of concern from my college friends kept popping up one after another, but I was so furious that my hands were shaking and I couldn't type a single word. At noon, the urgent meeting notice from the studio's administrative department hit me like a blow to the chest. I work as an assistant at an antique book restoration studio in downtown Westland, and the studio places the highest value on its reputation. Step into the conference room, and the supervisor and the administrative manager wore expressions of alertness. "Your online activity has drawn attention, and it's already hurting the studio's reputation," they said. I immediately played back the full surveillance footage, and the scene of Vespera throwing the cake was crystal clear. The moment the video started playing, the room fell utterly silent. The supervisor let out a sigh of relief. It's completely different from what's been circulating online. But the administrative manager advised me not to respond publicly, suggesting instead that I just let the matter die down on its own. That remark, "Don't add fuel to the fire," set me ablaze with anger. How could someone who'd never been falsely accused possibly understand what it feels like? I clenched my fists, forcing myself to remain silent, and then they suggested I take a leave of absence and temporarily handed over my work responsibilities. In the elevator, I caught my reflection in the mirror. My face was deathly pale, etched with humiliation. Passerby walked by oblivious, yet my reputation was being recklessly trampled upon by my own sister. Back home, I couldn't help but scroll through the comment section. The insults kept pouring in. "So jealous. You're not even worthy of being a sister." The stinging words mingled with seething rage, burning fiercely in my chest. I slammed my phone shut and threw it onto the coffee table. Kyle sat down quietly and handed me a cup of hot tea. "You don't have to prove anything to anyone," he said, his voice laced with suppressed anger that I could hear clearly. I gripped the cup tightly, my fingertips turning pale. "They all think I'm the bad guy. They've always believed only in her act." His words made me realize just how absurd it all was. As night fell, my inbox overflowed with messages from colleagues, half curious, half cautious, while only a handful privately spoke up in my defense. Gazing out the window at the lights beginning to flicker on, my rage gradually subsided, leaving behind nothing but a deep sense of resolve. For years, I've been cleaning up after Vespera's messes, but this time, she's publicly exposed my humiliation, and I'll never stay silent again. A few days later, my mom called, her voice trembling as if she already knew what was coming. She didn't say much, just that Dad wanted everyone to sit down and talk things through, to work it out. Her tone wasn't a request, it was a command. I said yes, though the moment I hung up the phone, my chest felt tight and heavy. As I drove the car into my parents' driveway, the winter air of Westland was already bone-chillingly cold, piercing through my skin and stinging my cheeks. Through the living room window, I saw Vespera's car already parked outside. Of course, she'd arrived early. Every time there was a performance to put on, she was always like this. The air inside the house felt even colder than the weather outside. Mom sat at the dining table, her hands tightly clutching a cup of tea, yet she hadn't taken a single sip. Dad stood by the window, pretending to read the newspaper. Vespera sat across from them, her makeup flawless, her expression deliberately made to look utterly fragile. "Lyral," Mom began, her voice soft yet tense, "we just want to get this over with." "Family members shouldn't argue in public," I said, pulling out a chair but not sitting down. "But neither should families humiliate others in public." Mom flinched slightly and glanced over at Vespera. Instantly, Vespera's eyes welled up just right, her voice caught with just the right amount of emotion, making it sound utterly believable. "I never imagined things would turn out this way," she said, her voice trembling ever so subtly. "It was other people who twisted the truth. I'm just too heartbroken." I raised an eyebrow. "Heartbroken? So you edited a video and sent it to thousands of strangers?" Vespera sniffed dramatically. "You're the one who made me look bad, Lyriel. It's because of your reaction that everyone now thinks I'm the bad guy." "Because of my reaction?" I tried hard to keep my voice calm. "It was you who threw my cake into the trash." "Vespera, enough," Dad interrupted me, putting down the newspaper he hadn't even glanced at. "She may have made a mistake, but she's still your sister. We're not going to take sides." I looked him straight in the eyes. "Every time it comes down to protecting her, you always say that. But what about me?" He frowned. "You're stronger. She's more sensitive. You know exactly what kind of person she is." I chuckled softly. "Yeah, I know. I know all too well what she's like." Mom's voice choked with emotion. "Please, can't we just let this whole thing go? The neighbors have started gossiping already." I turned slowly toward her. "You care more about what the neighbors think than about what she's done to me." Her gaze shifted away. "That's not true," she said, but her silence betrayed her. Vespera shot up from her seat, the chair screeching loudly across the floor. "This is absurd." You really enjoy this, don't you? She stormed out, slamming the door so hard that the picture frames on the wall began to shake. Mom called after her, but Vesper didn't look back. The echo of the slamming door lingered long after she'd gone. I stared at the door for a moment, then turned to my parents. You want peace, I said, and this is peace. I stepped into the hallway. The sound of my boots clicking against the hardwood railing was sharp and clear. Mom's voice, choked with emotion, came trailing behind me. Lyral, wait! Please, just wait! I stopped walking but didn't turn around. You're always telling me not to cause trouble, I whispered softly, but it's only her trouble that you ever seem to hear. I opened the door and stepped out into the cold air. The wind bit sharply at my cheeks, yet it felt cleaner than the air inside the house. For the first time, I didn't feel guilty about turning away. I felt free. That night, I realized that silence had never protected me. It had only ever protected her. For years, I'd mistaken quietness for peace and endurance for strength. But as I sat alone in my apartment, recalling Vespera's feigned tears, I finally understood. Silence only made me invisible. I opened my laptop and began typing out one name after another. People who'd once worked with her, gone to school with her, dated her, or trusted her. The list turned out to be longer than I'd imagined. I started with Laura, Vespera's former colleague at a creative products design firm in Salem. It had been years since we'd last spoken, but when I sent her a message, she replied within minutes. She's gotten herself into trouble again. I'm not surprised at all. What did she do this time? We ended up video chatting for nearly an hour. Leora showed me screenshots of some old messages, she said. Vespera was bragging in them about how she'd manipulated clients into getting free cultural and creative samples, and she even mentioned my name as a reference to make herself seem more credible. She said, "You're her business partner," Leora explained. That's exactly how she landed those orders. My stomach churned. Next came Kian, Vespera's old college friend. He sent me an audio recording, and the voice unmistakably belonged to Vespera. As long as you sound emotional enough, people will believe anything. Each new piece of evidence pointed to the same grim truth. Over the years, she'd been meticulously weaving lies. Within 48 hours, I'd received messages, screenshots, and recordings from 6 different people. Some were furious. Others seemed relieved, as if they'd finally been able to let it all out and breathe a sigh of relief. One email stood out in particular, its subject line reading, "You should know about this." The sender was Lysandra, who works in operations for a small, niche fragrance brand. "Your sister has been asking for free products for her beauty review account using your name. When we asked her to provide proof of the collaboration, she blocked us." She'd attached receipts and a screenshot of Vespera's old account, where my name was tagged under the collaboration label. I stared at the evidence folder on my desk, filled with dozens of files, each one a little lie finally coming to light. Kyle quietly entered the room. I didn't feel happy, not even angry, just a profound sense of clarity. "Are you sure you want to send these out?" he asked. "Once they're sent, there's no taking them back." I nodded. She wants an audience, so I'll give her one. For the next 2 hours, I kept editing the video. No over-the-top music, no offensive language, no narration. Just timestamps, facts, and evidence. The first clip showed Vesper throwing the cake, followed by screenshots, emails, text messages, and voice recordings, one after another. The final slide read, "This is what really happened, and this is what's been happening all along." When I posted the video, I didn't have high expectations, but within an hour, views started skyrocketing. People began sharing the video, captioning it with comments like, "Finally, we're seeing the whole story," and "The evidence speaks louder than tears." The comment section was flooded with supportive voices. I knew something wasn't right about that first video. This woman deserves an apology, and never underestimate those who remain silent. They're just gathering evidence. "We've seen the video. We just hope this whole thing ends here." Dad didn't say a word. This time, their silence didn't sting me at all. Instead, it felt like tacit acceptance. I stepped onto the balcony, where the city bathed in the morning light was still half asleep. For years, I'd carried the heavy burden of silently defending myself, waiting for fairness to arrive. Now, finally, I understood. Fairness never comes in silence, Only by exposing the truth can it ever emerge. The breeze brushed against my cheeks. Vespera was paying the price for what she'd done, and I, at last, was no longer shadowed by her presence. Truth doesn't need to be shouted, it just needs to be seen. Within a week of my video going viral, Vespera's world began to crumble rapidly. Her beauty brand sponsors canceled their contracts one after another, issuing statements that they wouldn't tolerate dishonest behavior. The beauty promotion agencies she'd been working with pulled her photos from their websites overnight. By Friday, her email address had stopped working altogether. The auto-reply read, "This account no longer exists." The ripple effects were immediate and relentless. Neighbors who'd once enthusiastically waved across the lawn now went out of their way to avoid her. Mutual friends left the group chats where she'd previously flaunted her collaborations and image management. Screenshots of her past posts started surfacing, and the comment sections were flooded with analyses dissecting her fake moments. The internet never forgets, and it revels in seeing justice served. At first, her mom still tried to defend her online, posting vague comments like, "We all make mistakes. Let's not engage in cyberbullying." But she quickly found herself inundated with backlash. "Making mistakes doesn't leave behind this many receipts." Less than an hour later, she'd already deleted the comment. Dad remained silent throughout. His silence was more powerful than any words could ever be. One morning, an envelope bearing the logo of a law firm slipped under the door into our apartment. It was a letter from Vespera's lawyer, demanding that I stop spreading and delete the video, or else face a lawsuit for defamation. The tone was threatening, yet it carried a hint of desperation. After reading it, Kyle said softly, "They're just bluffing." I dialed the number on the lawyer's letter, introduced myself by name, and explained, "All the documents in the video are authentic and time-stamped. I can provide copies if needed." The call lasted only 3 minutes, and after that, no one ever mentioned the letter again. 2 days later, Dad showed up at our door. He'd lost weight, his shoulders slumped, and the composure he'd once exuded had been replaced by guilt. We hadn't seen each other since that last family meeting. Holding his hat tightly in his hands, he kept rubbing it absent-mindedly. "Lyriel, I should have seen the truth much earlier. I wanted peace so badly that I simply ignored the facts." I didn't offer him any comfort, just nodded and said, "You can still see clearly now. You just need to keep your distance." He swallowed hard and nodded through tears, saying, "I understand." After he left, I gently closed the door behind him, yet my heart was free of anger. Being proven right didn't bring me any satisfaction. All I felt was a sense of relief, the feeling that it was finally over. Meanwhile, Vespera's apartment lease was terminated early. The landlord had grown tired of all the attention she was getting, so she moved back in with her parents. Her sponsor pulled out completely, and even her former friends stopped speaking to her. The glamorous image she'd painstakingly crafted shattered into pieces, leaving her only with silence and rumors. Sometimes, people online would tag me with her old photos, as if asking whether I felt smug or vindicated. But I never responded. Justice isn't something to celebrate. It's something that brings clarity. A few weeks later, I received an unexpected email from the former head of the Ancient Books Restoration Workshop, its subject line reading, "Opportunity at the Brighton branch." They'd seen how I handled the situation in public, calm, objective, and composed, and so they asked me to lead a new restoration project team. It was both a promotion and a relocation. I read the email twice, almost unable to believe it. Brighton, a whole new beginning. That evening, I drove through Westland City Center for the last time. The skyline shimmered in the setting sun, familiar yet somehow smaller than I remembered. I parked my car on a bridge overlooking the river, the very spot where Kyle and I had our first date. The water surface glowed golden, and in that moment, I found myself thinking back to everything that had led me to this point, the cakes, the silences, the storms, and finally, the peace. Back home, I began quietly packing my bags, taking only the essentials and leaving everything else behind. Before closing the last suitcase, I found an old family photo. Mom, Dad, Vespera, and me, all of us smiling, as if we truly believed in that illusory beauty. I slipped the photo into a drawer instead of packing it into my suitcase. Some memories are best left where they belong, in the house they once called home. Late at night, Kyle asked, "Do you think she'll change?" I thought for a long time before answering, "Maybe." Then I said, "But I'm not going to wait around to see if she does anymore." The next morning, as we finally pulled out onto the driveway, the air seemed to grow lighter somehow. The city slowly shrank smaller and smaller in the rearview mirror, yet my chest felt immeasurably open and free. The truth had echoed long enough. Now it was time to shake off its relentless pursuit and start living, for real. A year later, I stood in that same kitchen, the very same walls, the same eerie silence, but I was a completely different person. The afternoon sunlight streamed in through the blinds, falling onto the counter where that cake had once been placed. I was no longer haunted by that memory. Now, all that remained were the marble countertop, the sunlight, and a profound sense of peace. I'd returned to Westland for just a brief visit, only to see my parents. I hadn't told Vespera I was coming, nor had I planned to see her. Some doors, once closed, are meant to stay shut forever. Mom hugged me at the door, her arms hesitating slightly, as if unsure whether she was allowed to do so. "You look great," she whispered softly. Her hair had grown grayer, and her eyes were weary yet kind. Dad peeked out from the living room with a faint smile, as if silently offering his support. We talked about safe topics, the weather, our new neighbors, the tomatoes in the backyard. The name Vespera wasn't mentioned once, from beginning to end. That evening, before I headed upstairs, my mom handed me an envelope. "I wrote something for you," she said softly. The handwriting on the front of the envelope was familiar, neat and careful, written in golden ink. I waited until the house had grown quiet before opening the envelope. Inside, the letter was filled with apologies and remorse, the kind of sorrow that comes too late, a sorrow that can't change anything. "We didn't realize before how deeply we hurt you in our pursuit of peace. Now I understand. True peace without justice isn't peace at all." I read it once, then carefully folded the letter and slipped it back into the envelope. I didn't reply. Forgiveness doesn't need to be declared. Sometimes, simply letting go of the heavy burdens of the past is enough. The next morning, I drove through the city center to buy a cake from the very same bakery, still infused with that same aroma of cocoa and vanilla, wrapping around me like a memory. The woman behind the counter smiled. "Another birthday, huh?" I nodded. "Yeah, I'll take the chocolate-flavored one." I didn't mention who the cake was for. This time, it was for myself. When I got home, Kyle had already placed 2 candles on the table, one for him, one for me. "Just a little party," he said, "just the way you like it." We ate the cake quietly. The cream was soft and rich. Leaning back in his chair, he said, "You know what? This is the best kind of revenge." I shook my head with a smile. "No, this isn't revenge. It's liberation." He gave me a gentle smile. "It's pretty much the same thing, though." "Not really," I said. "Revenge keeps you tied to them forever, but liberation lets you walk away completely." Later, I logged into the online group I'd created 6 months earlier, the Silent Alliance. This is a space created for those who were overlooked, silenced, or even blamed during their upbringing, simply for keeping the peace. Today, we've already gathered hundreds of members, and every week, more people share their stories. Some write about siblings who took everything away from them. Others write about parents who never stood up for themselves. I try my best to respond to every single message. "You're not alone." To one person, I wrote, "Your worth doesn't depend on their approval." Each message feels like it's gently soothing an old wound, not with anger, but with understanding. Healing is never dramatic. It's slow, steady, and a quiet form of resistance. Before midnight, I sat by the window, watching the city lights outside. They shimmered in the darkness like countless tiny second chances. A year ago, I thought peace meant silence. Now I understand. Peace isn't something others give you. It's something you stop giving up on so easily. I blew out the candle, and in the darkness, the last flicker of flame shimmered briefly before dying out. The room was filled with the scent of chocolate and an overwhelming sense of calm. Maybe this is the real truth. Only when certain things fall apart can you finally breathe freely in the space they leave behind. Thank you for sticking with me until the end, I said softly, as if speaking directly to the audience on the other side of the screen. If you've ever been forced to choose between peace and your family, share your story below. I'll read them all, one by one.